My name is Teresa, and I'm 52 years old. I have a husband who's the president of an IT company and a son who will be starting middle school next year. My husband is kind, and my son is a good, honest boy. We live very happily together. I believe this happiness is a gift from God, a reward for enduring the tough times in my precious marriage. I first got married at 35 to Mason, a senior colleague at my company. Mason was 38, a reliable and wonderful senior at work. We had a long relationship at the company, so after dating for 6 months, we quickly decided to get married. We even had a family meeting before the wedding, and Mason's parents seemed like kind and nice people. After the meeting, Mason expressed his wish to live with his aging parents, but given their pleasant demeanor at the meeting, I agreed. We never planned to have a wedding ceremony, so we just registered our marriage and started living together immediately. Initially, Mason's father Josh and mother Cordelia were as kind as I remembered, and our newlywed life was enjoyable, though a bit cautious. However, about 6 months later, Josh and Cordelia's attitudes began to change. "Teresa, aren't you planning on having children?" Cordelia asked me abruptly one Saturday while I was cleaning the house. Her direct question caught me off guard, and I was unable to respond. "It's been half a year since you got married. You're not in your 20s anymore, you're 35. You don't have time to waste. Do you understand?" She pressed. I was scared by her sudden accusatory tone. "We do want children, and we're not using contraception, but it's just not happening," I replied. "That's exactly why you can't afford to be so casual about it. Go to the hospital for a checkup immediately," she insisted. Following her advice, I found a hospital and went for a consultation. The doctor said, "There doesn't seem to be any physical problem, so perhaps it's just a matter of timing." When I told Cordelia, she said, "Really? Then make sure you calculate your fertile period and get pregnant quickly." I was frustrated by her pushiness, but held my tongue. Since that day, I started taking my temperature daily and tried to conceive with Mason, as per the doctor's advice. Despite visiting the hospital every month, I still wasn't pregnant after 6 months. The doctor had said my uterus was in excellent condition, and there was no reason I couldn't get pregnant at any time. The problem could either be stress affecting my health or an issue with my husband's sperm, the doctor suggested. Cordelia often pressured me to get pregnant quickly, which indeed stressed me out. The doctor recommended we test Mason's sperm just in case. When I reported this to Mason and asked him to get tested, his reaction was shocking. "What? Why? Why do I have to go through a test?" he exclaimed. I just explained it. The doctor said since I'm fine, we should check your sperm, I replied. "There's no way I have a problem. It must be your stress. Why don't you take a walk or something to relax?" he suggested dismissively. "I'm considering that, but..." I was completely taken aback by his response and felt truly shocked. I couldn't persuade him further that day, and a month passed without any change. I was still not pregnant, and Cordelia kept pressing me about it. I decided to ask Mason again to get tested. "Cordelia asked me again this month if we have kids yet. Can you please get tested? If there's no issue with you, then that's that. Please, I want you to get the test," I pleaded. "So persistent. I told you, I'm perfectly healthy. There's no way I'm the problem. Stop nagging." Mason suddenly shouted and threw a tissue box at my face. I was stunned that he would throw something at me. I was too scared to say anything more. After some thought, I decided to ask Cordelia to persuade Mason to get tested. Since she wanted a grandchild and was a woman, I hoped she would understand my situation. I shared with Cordelia what the doctor had said, and that Mason refused to get tested. "Cordelia, could you please talk to Mason about getting the test?" But my attempt backfired. "What are you doing? Blaming Mason?" Cordelia suddenly exploded in anger. "It's the woman who gets pregnant, not the man. It's clearly a problem with your body, not Mason's. What kind of wife blames her husband like this? Unbelievable! Cordelia angrily accused. I wanted to argue back, saying that it's not only women who are responsible for pregnancy, but I couldn't speak further in the face of her red-faced rage. Perhaps she was upset at the suggestion that her son could be the problem. I never expected her to be so unwilling to listen. From that day on, Josh and Cordelia became even harsher towards me. Whenever they saw me, they would loudly complain. A daughter-in-law who can't have children is useless. Or, we don't need a daughter-in-law who can't bear children. Or, she's just a burden to our family. Constantly making snide remarks about my inability to conceive. Sharon, my sister-in-law, who lived nearby and often visited with her children, also started making similar remarks after hearing from Cordelia. One day, while her kids were playing and I was doing housework, Sharon came up to me and said, "Why can't you get pregnant, Teresa? Do you dislike children? They are adorable. You should try to have one soon." It was clearly a provocative statement. I wanted to say that the test showed no issues with me, and the problem might be with Mason, but I held back. However, Sharon seemed to sense my thoughts and said, "Oh, just as Mom said, you're blaming Bro. Maybe it's because you're older and can't get pregnant. I got married at 25 and got pregnant right away." She spat out these words and left. The daily taunts from Josh and Cordelia and Sharon continued. We kept trying to conceive, but I still didn't get pregnant. A year passed, and their behavior worsened. Not just taunting, they started harassing me in other ways, asking me to fetch drinks, go shopping, and do other chores they used to handle themselves. At first, I complied with their requests, but one day when I was busy with my own work, I became frustrated and talked back. "I'm busy right now, please do it yourself." To this, Josh, who had asked me to do something at the time, replied, "Since Teresa can't bear children and is useless, at least be useful as a servant." I was dumbfounded. It dawned on me that they had suddenly started asking for these chores because they saw me not as a daughter-in-law, but as a servant. I did feel guilty about not being able to have children, but did that mean I had to become a servant? Shocked, I couldn't talk back any further, and ended up doing the chores as asked. I once sought help from Mason, without much hope. They called me a servant. Don't you think that's wrong? "Well, we don't have kids right now, so doing chores and helping out seems reasonable, doesn't it?" Mason responded, unsurprisingly offering no support. From that point, I began to shut down emotionally, not thinking about anything. I started disliking Mason, and even stopped trying to conceive. Am I destined to work as a servant in this house forever? With such thoughts, I let time pass, feeling helpless. But finally, I reached my breaking point. It was a weekend, and Cordelia insulted not only me, but also my parents. "Sending a daughter-in-law who can't get pregnant? Your parents are cruel. We didn't need a daughter-in-law who can't have kids. Useless parents raise useless children," she mocked. Something inside me snapped. Enough is enough. What now? I've tolerated enough about myself, but I won't allow you to speak ill of my parents. After that, I ignored whatever Josh and Cordelia said. That night, when Mason returned from golf, I immediately spoke up. "Mason, I don't want to be with you or your family anymore. I want a divorce." "What? What are you talking about all of a sudden?" "Josh, Cordelia, and Sharon, they all make fun of me day in, day out. It was bad enough with just me, but today, Cordelia insulted my parents as well. I can't forgive that. And you didn't even cooperate with the medical tests, let alone help me when your family was bullying me. I've reached my limit. I'm definitely getting a divorce." "Wait a minute. Let's talk this through properly." Prompted by Mason, we went to the living room together, where Josh and Cordelia were watching TV. "Dad, Mom, there's a serious problem." What's wrong? Suddenly, Teresa wants a divorce. What? They were both surprised and seemed a bit shaken. Teresa, what do you mean? Such a sudden decision for divorce? It's not sudden. I've been thinking about this for a long time. Maybe divorce is too much. Mason and we might have had our faults. We're sorry for that. What do you mean, might have had faults? After all the daily taunts you gave me? We're sorry. We didn't mean it. Maybe we went a bit too far. Sorry. It's not just went a bit too far. It's too late for apologies now. I'm fed up. Josh and Cordelia's attempt to stop the divorce wasn't out of concern for me. It was just about money. Mason's family owned a small electronics store in a little town. They pretended to be well off in the neighborhood, but the business wasn't doing that well, and the household was struggling. Mason and I contributed to the rent with our incomes. It seemed like Josh and Cordelia were living off the money we gave them, and the store was in a precarious state. So their attempt to stop the divorce was simply because they couldn't afford to lose my income. Their transparent efforts to stop me had no effect, and I left the house with just my essentials, heading straight to my parents' house, an hour away by bus. I hadn't told my parents about the harassment at Mason's family's house, not wanting to worry them, but they simply welcomed me back without asking any questions. That night, Mason called me multiple times. I won't reconsider. I'll bring the divorce papers when they're ready. Goodbye. I worked at the same company as Mason, but avoided him as much as possible. We worked in different departments, so there was no interference with my work. Later, I prepared the divorce papers and went with my parents to Mason's family home. Mason and father-in-law and mother-in-law tried to stop me, saying various things, but my parents and I completely ignored them and insisted on filling out the divorce papers. Seeing our firm stance, Mason and his family finally gave up. After filling out the papers and packing my remaining belongings, we left Mason's house. I thought it was all over once the divorce papers were submitted. However, a week later, I discovered the truly despicable nature of Mason's family. At work, I noticed my colleagues frequently glancing at me. Thinking the news of my divorce had simply spread, I focused on my work. Then my close colleague, Kaylee, rushed over and pulled me to an empty corridor. What's going on? I asked. It's serious, Teresa. Rumors are spreading about your divorce. It's bound to come out sooner or later. It's fine. It's not just that. The rumor is that the divorce was because you can't have children. They're saying Mason wants kids and got married, but you deceived him. Poor guy. What? That's awful. It was a terrible rumor. While childlessness was a factor in the divorce, the cause of infertility was unclear, and certainly, I hadn't deceived him into marriage. I called Mason outside the company to confront him. Did you start this rumor? Does it matter? It's true anyway. It's not true. The cause was unknown, and there was no issue with me. Now I see. You spread it. Why would you do something so cruel? Well, you started it by suddenly divorcing and making our family life difficult. If you spread a bad reason for the divorce first, it would have made me look bad. I see. He acted first to protect his own position. A truly despicable person. I once respected him as a senior colleague. The rumor quickly spread to other departments, and I gave up trying to correct it. I immediately started looking for a new job. That weekend, another surprising thing happened. There was a cafe near Mason's family home where I used to go, but I hadn't been there since the divorce. I decided to visit and explain my situation. At the cafe, I heard a shocking story from a staff member I was friendly with. Apparently, the whole neighborhood was abuzz with rumors about our divorce, and that it was due to my inability to have children. I thought Mason might have spread these rumors, but the staff member told me it was Cordelia, who had been gossiping in various shops and meetings. It seemed like retaliation for the divorce from her side. But I decided it was no longer my concern and tried to forget about it. As for my job hunt, I was lucky to quickly find a new position. The company was small, with about 20 employees, but everyone, including my boss and colleagues, was pleasant, making work enjoyable. I had almost forgotten about Mason when something reminded me of him. A woman in her 20s joined the company shortly after me. When I asked about her previous company, the name sounded familiar. She mentioned leaving due to a mean senior colleague. The senior was competent, but disliked for their unpleasant character, and had been bad-mouthing their own family just before she left. The story was about a brother whose wife couldn't have children and got divorced, deceived into marriage. The company didn't take it seriously, but she felt uncomfortable just hearing such mean gossip. She disliked that senior and decided to join our company when she got the job offer. That company, it turned out, was where Sharon worked. So not just Mason and Cordelia, but Sharon too was spreading similar rumors. I thought it was awful how the entire family engaged in such behavior. Whether it was for Mason or just spite, I couldn't understand what Sharon gained from it, but it was clear they were all terrible people. However, I decided to leave it behind, as they were no longer a part of my life. About a month after joining the company, when I was getting used to the job, the director mentioned he wanted to introduce me to someone. After work, I followed him to a restaurant where I was introduced to a calm and composed man. Liam, 42 years old. He owned a small but growing IT company. The director, a university classmate of Liam's, had shown him my photo, and Liam had expressed interest, knowing about my divorce. Liam and I hit it off immediately, and within a year of meeting, we got married. I was initially scared of remarrying due to my past experience, but Liam's earnest proposal won me over. Liam said I didn't need to tell him the reason for my divorce, but I wanted to share it before marriage, including the possibility that I might not be able to have children. Upon hearing this, Liam said, "I'd be happy if we have children, but I married you because I want to be with you, so it's okay if we don't." Seeing his reaction, I felt I could trust him. 6 months into our marriage, I became pregnant with a boy. When I found out, I was overjoyed and cried a lot, realizing that the issue wasn't with me. Once the pregnancy was stable, I contacted my former colleague, Kaylee. "Congratulations, and I guess it wasn't your fault after all," she said. Kaylee later shared the news with everyone at the company. That year-end, Mason left the company, and nobody knew where he moved to next. I also informed the cafe staff, who were delighted and promised to share the news with the neighborhood acquaintances. The following year, the staff told me that Mason's family had moved away. At that time, when the elderly neighbors gathered at the cafe, they would say, "Cordelia was a liar, wasn't she?" Apparently, Cordelia's story had become a topic of humor. I also learned from the colleague who previously worked with Sharon that she too had left her job, around the same time as Mason. As for the baby, I gave birth to a healthy boy. Liam supported me in many ways, and his company continued to grow and prosper. I too was doing well in my job and living happily. The marriage with Mason was tough, but it made me realize how precious and happy my current life is. I am determined to never let go of this happiness.